my life philosophy is kind of like we're not here for very long, and there's just so much to do. There's so many interesting things in the world. My whole goal is really to maximize as many like experiences and opportunities as I can.
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we're speaking with Jake Whinnery, a mechanical engineer at Apple's camera hardware team and co-founder of Hardware is Hard, a thriving online community that empowers hardware engineers to land top-tier roles. With internships at Tesla, Meta, Relativity Space, and NASA Ames, Jake blends deep mechanical expertise, cross-functional collaboration, and startup grit. Today, he joins us to unpack his journey in hardware design, technical leadership, and his passion for building engineering resources for others. Jake, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. Appreciate it. It's quite the intro.
So what made you decide to become an engineer?
Oh, geez. So I guess like STEM has always been a pretty big emphasis for me and my family. Both my parents actually met getting their PhDs in chemistry. But I think at least my dad probably belonged more as an engineer on some level than a scientist. He was always tinkering in the garage and was a big woodworker. And so I kind of grew up doing some projects there. And then in high school, I had this big love of physics. It helped that I had one of the greatest physics teachers at my high school. But he really piqued my interest into physics. Briefly looked at maybe even going into physics, but I figured I'd like something a little bit more applied. So kind of was choosing between mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering, actually, and I ended up going to Berkeley in mechanical. That was the one I got in for. And honestly, never really looked back. I love mechanical engineering. It's such a cool field, very broad.
Awesome. How was your college experience? Was it kind of the typical college experience, or did you have any special experiences? At what point, we're going to get into the newsletter, Hardware is Hard. At what point did you decide to start that?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess that's a pretty big question, but I don't know. I got to college and my personality has always been kind of work hard, play hard, try and do everything you can and really maximize the opportunity. So when I got to college, I joined a bunch of clubs. I took way more classes than I probably should have that first semester. Didn't sleep much. Joined like the Hyperloop team. I was on the Formula SAE team. I was on Enable Tech, which is like a biomedical assistive device club. I was extremely involved in the Formula team, actually. That was probably one of the best decisions I made throughout college, was joining that because it put me in contact with this group of engineers who were so much smarter than I was. And so they were able to really kind of tutor and mentor me, especially two of them, like Tony No and Rohan Patel, who were two of like the most impactful people on my life. They really showed me what it meant to be a mechanical engineer and told me like, hey, you should be getting internships. This is what you need to know in order to apply for them. And also, let's build a car together, which was another cool experience. Unfortunately, though, then COVID happened in March of 2020. So that actually, I guess the way to view it is closed some opportunities, unfortunately, because like school went remote. But opened a lot of other ones because then I actually, my partner Wilder convinced me to take the next year off and do internships, which kind of changed my way that I view myself as like engineering student to engineer, I guess is kind of where I draw the line. And so then I got to go to Relativity Space back when they were really small. I was number like 200-ish. As employees. There were only 4 interns. So that was a crazy experience. That was probably the most fun I've ever had in an internship. I just felt like every day I was learning so much, especially because I didn't really know much about space at the time. And so everybody else at the company obviously had worked in space for like 20 years. And so they were so happy to like teach me. And so that was really exciting opportunity. And then I went to Tesla the next year or the next semester and worked there for 8 months on their autopilot electronics product development team. And that was kind of just like sharpening skills through the fire, I guess. I had no idea what I could accomplish until I was asked to do 4 times as much as I thought I could.
Talk a little bit more about that. That seems like a really interesting experience or set of experiences that you had. What is there one in particular that stands out where you just thought there's no way that I can accomplish what's being asked of me, and then lo and behold, you did it?
Yeah. I guess there are a few instances that come to mind. Um, One of them would probably be like if somebody had told me that I would be in charge of like systems going into production and with so little oversight, I think I would have been surprised going in, especially ones where I was doing like a custom development with a bunch of different vendors across like Japan, China, and the US. And there's nobody else on the call. It's just me and their team of engineers at like 10 to midnight, calling about new technologies and how they can develop it for our needs, getting in samples. I developed the entire test plan, do the full stack, and then like present it to higher level leadership to try and convince them to use this new technology in the semi truck, which they did ultimately do, which was really exciting. But I think going in, that would have sounded way too daunting for me, especially on, the more months timeline instead of years. So that was really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so you were spending, late night phone calls with overseas suppliers, and during college, you're signing up for all these different clubs, taking, in your words, more classes than you probably should have. It seems like you have this drive and also just the physical stamina to do a lot, to spend a lot of time working. You mentioned you didn't sleep a whole lot. Where do you think that drive and that mindset comes from?
As a source, I think just like my life philosophy is kind of like we're not here for very long, and there's just so much to do. There's so many interesting things in the world. And my whole goal is really to maximize as many like experiences and opportunities as I can. And so, I mean, if that means not a lot of downtime, I think I'm okay with that. I think I would way rather be doing something interesting and fun than sitting around resting. And so like kind of what that means is saying yes to a lot of opportunities and then trying to downsize them later, maybe if you decide it's not something that you want to continue with as a priority. But in general, I love opportunities knocking on my doorstep and really being able to kind of seize that by the reins.
How do you manage your energy? I mean, you're a relatively young guy, so you probably still have a lot of energy. But even, guys your age, I'm making an assumption. I'm guessing you're like late 20s, something like that. And it can be hard to fuel yourself and push through a lot of late nights, not getting a lot of sleep. What do you do to manage your energy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, I think it changes like with age. I think probably 3 years ago, maybe I'd have a different perspective, full of more energy back then. But I guess what I try to do is ideally work on things that energize you. So then if you're working, then you're also gaining energy. So like, take the example of like, basically if you have the option to go get a PhD, for example, maybe you did, like I did 4 years of research in college and I never really loved any of it. It wasn't something that gave me energy. And so even though it was something that like my parents went and did and they would love for me to go to grad school, I guess I decided it's not really something that energizes me as much as going out and getting to solve problems in industry or side hobbies, making something that's cool. Like I love desk toys. And so that's something that I always find time for, to like basically put together a Saturday, carve it out and just work on making like, right now I'm working on like a split flap machine. And so I just, things that I love to do, I think they're very energizing. And so it's hard to get tired of them.
From motors and robotics to controls, automation, and precision prototyping, Simutech brings ANSYS simulation tools and expert insight directly to your team. We help you accelerate design, reduce risk, and eliminate costly rework.
Validate before you fabricate. Simutech Group helps you simulate thermal stress, vibration, fluid flow, electronics cooling, electromagnetic performance, you name it.
Whether you're in automotive, aerospace, energy, industrial automation, or the next big thing, Simutech partners with innovators to deliver simulation-driven results that move products forward. Build smarter machines, launch stronger products, scale faster with Simutech's simulation support by your side.
Simutech Group, your engineering partner in motion. Visit simutechgroup.com and let's power up your next design.
That's awesome. Let's go back to something you said a little bit ago. You mentioned taking a break from college for a year so that you can do an internship, which is a little unusual for the standard college track. Thinking back to that time, how did that year off actually doing engineering work as an intern, how did that influence the rest of your career? And in what set of circumstances would you suggest students consider doing the same thing?
That's a great question. It's something I actually think is extremely important. So that year off really just changed my entire career, I think. Having internships helps you get more internships at the places you want to go. And so it's kind of a compounding effect. And so by the end of college, I could go pretty much wherever I wanted to out of graduation, where the job market was not in a super strong place. And so a lot of other people were really struggling to find anything. And so they were willing to take a job in, say, a position that they didn't want to do, like a design engineer taking a position in testing or reliability or manufacturing or something that wasn't their primary interest. And once you do that, I think it's really hard to kind of break back out into what you are interested without taking some pay cuts or going somewhere that you don't want to go. And so I was really fortunate in that doing so many internships in college and taking that year off made me not only be able to go where I wanted to go, but know what I wanted to do. Because across each internship, I tried to go to a different sector also. I worked in kind of NASA was more like a research position. And then I worked at a small biomed consulting company called Triple Ring. And there I was doing microfluidics development. And then after that, I went to Procter and Gamble, and I was doing process engineering optimizations in obviously a whole different sector of home products. And then I went to Relativity, and I was a propulsion engineer all of a sudden. And so then I got to learn all this cool stuff about metal 3D printing and 9-axis CNCing and stuff where you're only making a few parts, but they need to be perfect and need to perform under crazy high and low temperatures. So that was cool. And then I went into the automotive sector, and I got to try out, a little bit of optics knowledge, a lot more mass manufacturing, injection molded parts, snap fits, all that sort of stuff. And then I went into consumer electronics for my last internship, and I really enjoyed some aspects of that. And so then I decided to continue in that realm kind of after graduation.
Seems like there are a lot of advantages associated with doing an internship mid-college. Why? This is speculation, of course, but just out of curiosity, why do you think that universities don't encourage this? And why do you think more students, even outside of universities' encouragement or lack thereof, why don't more students take that route?
I mean, so I think one really pertinent example is University of Waterloo. They have a required internship program. I think everybody there has to do as many internships as I did. It's a 5-year engineering degree as a result, but also as a result at Tesla, Meta, and Apple that I've seen, there's far more Waterloo graduates than any other school that I'm aware of, because when a company is hiring, they're looking for somebody that they hopefully know can already execute. It's not optimal because we are technically new grads, but this is just the way the job market's changed over the last 10 years. Now, unfortunately, just graduating doesn't mean as much as it used to. And so now you kind of need something to set yourself apart and say hey, I already know exactly what it means to work in your environment. And so, my uptime of once you bring me on, I'm going to be productive immediately instead of 6 months from now. That's invaluable to companies. And so they love it. As for why schools in the US don't push that more, I think part of it is the education system is a little bit slow to change. And I think we're seeing that really pertinently right now with the rise of AI and the intersection of AI and education tools. Like the curriculum just hasn't really changed in the last 15, 20 years, even as a lot of other things in how we can deliver and absorb knowledge has. And so, unfortunately, I think there's a bit of that. And then also the school wants to push people out in 4 years as quickly as possible. So they're not necessarily as interested in what you're doing afterwards. So I think that's probably the root of it. But
Yeah, unfortunately, the business goals for the university don't necessarily line up for what's best for the student long term.
yeah. And I wonder if there's a way to, I'm a huge fan of aligning incentives. I think that there's a lot of companies that have kind of built their backbone on this. And I love it. So I wonder if there is a way to like, somehow, like, I think there's a couple universities now, I forget their names, that are maybe doing some level of alignment between like your student loan payment and how much you're making after you graduate, where like, they take 10% for 3 years of whatever you're making. So then their incentive is to make you find a job after you graduate. So maybe that would help.
That's awesome. I love that. I mean, in my opinion, obviously you need to learn the fundamentals of engineering, but a university's deliverable to me should be a job, a good job for the engineer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk a little bit about hardware is hard. What is hardware is hard, and how did it get started?
Yeah, sure. So hardware is hard we try to make it the go-to resource for mechanical engineers who are looking to get a job, especially entry-level jobs or, a couple of years out of college. Basically what happened was back in 2018, 2019, 2020, there were effectively no good resources online for people looking to go into design roles or anything about technical interviews in realistically like the 21st century. You would search technical mechanical engineering interview questions and you would be confronted with stuff that nobody that I had met at college had ever been asked in a context of a engineering role, especially within tech. And so kind of after taking so many internships, we realized that there really is a formula to it. Like the cantilever beam question is extremely common because you can take it in so many directions and there's really no resource for it. And so typed up like a little Word doc. And when people would ask me for tips, once I started getting a little bit older on interviewing, I would just send them the Word doc. And eventually my friend Wilder and I, my co-founder, we were in Portugal actually, and we got COVID, and I think it was right before the 2021 school year started. And so we got COVID. We were trapped inside for 10 days and we decided what should we do? And so we just started kind of writing down problems that we'd seen in our own circles. And one of them was that a lot of like junior students or junior transfers and first gen students, especially, had not really been exposed to the same level of mentorship that we had. And so they didn't know that necessarily they should be interning every summer, or that like, what a co-op is, and taking a semester off could pay for itself actually, if not significantly more than that, as well as, how do we get these jobs? How do we succeed in a technical interview? Because if you never had a design project in your first couple of years of college, how are you going to talk about a project that you've done during an interview? And so basically, we compiled a bunch of these documents that we had written over the years and advice that we had given to people. And we were like, okay, let's just throw it up on a website for a couple $100s a year. And now we can just text people the website link when they ask us for advice, instead of, typing out a long paragraph and sending them a Google Drive link, stuff like that. And so that was really how it started. It was never really intended at the time to be much more than that. And then we gave, I think, 2 in-person seminars through like the engineering student services at Berkeley. And from there, we actually got much more traffic than we expected, kind of like in the hundreds of people range, kind of relatively immediately within a couple of weeks. And that was cool to see. I mean, you think, oh, wow, hundreds of people want to see what I said. So then we decided to add some more content to it. The 4-year plan is kind of a big one of like what you should be kind of looking to do each year if you're like a standard mechanical engineer. Big fan of the LinkedIn Trojan horse. That's Wilder's method. He pioneered it, of basically dive bombing every employee, every engineer at a company with LinkedIn DMs, and then 90% of them don't respond. 10% of them do. Half of those then ask for a resume. Suddenly you have 5 interviews and you get 3 positions. And so,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's just kind of like a general marketing funnel almost. So some pretty funny stats on that. But yeah, so then we just kept adding to the website. And then later that year, so in August, I guess, maybe 6 months after we launched the website, we decided, hey, what if we started a newsletter? That could be a good way to basically, right now we're not making any profit. We're also not collecting any customer data. So it would be cool if we had a direct line to people who are engineers. That might be something of value later. And then as a hook, I mean, because there's so few technical engineering questions and answers, like you can find some questions if you scrape Glassdoor. That was the classic back in the late 2010s of just scraping Glassdoor and finding every question for Apple or whatever company that you're going to go apply to. But they never have answers, let alone ones that are necessarily right. And so created a book. The book creation happened later. But yeah, so created the newsletter where the goal was just, every other week, send out a technical question and an answer. And we had, of course, compiled a few hundred technical questions we'd been asked over the years at different companies. And so just kind of went through the best ones and said, okay, I'll answer this one this week. And without ChatGPT, I think the research was a lot more involved into making sure it was right. So that definitely helps nowadays. Yeah, so it also helped with my own interviewing skills. I feel very comfortable in most technical interviews just because I then had the opportunity to write, 30, 50, 60 of these questions and answers. And then from there, I actually compiled it into a book that we now sell on the website just as kind of a prep guide for people looking to apply to jobs.
Nice. How has the site and the newsletter grown and evolved over the years? The Product Development Expo, or PDX, is your chance to learn from subject matter experts providing practical, hands-on training for dozens of different engineering topics. GD&T, Advanced Surface Modeling, DFM, plating and finishing techniques, programming robots, adhesive dispensing, prototyping tips and tricks, and lots more. PDX happens October 21st and 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Learn more at pdexpo.engineer. That's pdexpo.engineer.
Yeah, so it's way bigger now than I ever would have imagined back then. The newsletter goes out to roughly 13,000 mechanical engineers now. It's extremely targeted. I don't think anybody who's not a hardware engineer would really be interested in this sort of content. So it is cool. I feel like we have a kind of direct tap to many of the young mechanical engineers in the nation. We've had over, I don't even know the exact amount, but I think last year we had over 100,000 site visits, which was huge. And so, yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point now where occasionally I'll meet somebody who's a mechanical engineer and I'll tell them my name and they'll be like, oh my God, I know you. So that's not something I really ever expected to be attached to this, at least.
You're famous, a celebrity.
Yeah, at least on LinkedIn, I guess.
So you have the Mechanical Engineering Technical Interview Guide, which we've kind of talked around a little bit already, but can you, outside of the cantilever example, are there any other examples that you can share, some of the most commonly asked interview technical questions that engineers out there who are applying for jobs should be aware of?
Sure, yeah. So usually it's funny, actually. If you had a very, very strong high school physics background, you can usually answer many of the interview questions or technical interview questions because a lot of them are actually like physics brain teasers. So like one of the most common ones back in the day, I don't know if they still use this as much now because now everybody knows about it, was like, throwing a rock off of a boat, does the water level go up or down? So they love having stuff that's like a little bit unintuitive because, somebody might expect that because you throw the rock in off the boat, like basically the water level would go up because there's more stuff down there now. But then, because the boat rises, then it actually goes down because the rock is more dense and it was being supported by the boat before. Anyways, that's not really relevant. But so they love physics brain teasers. Those are big ones. Usually you'll also get, other than the cantilever beam one, which they'll do a bunch of variations. They could do variations in natural frequency, like force deflection is the most common, cross beam optimization. Those are all big ones. And then they'll have one in manufacturing usually. So a lot of times they pick whatever is most familiar to you and run with that. And so like injection molding is a really popular one. They'll ask about like, how would you design like a Lego to be injection molded, for example. They'll give you like some unoptimized shape. And so you can really share a lot of your knowledge through that, which is always a good opportunity. And then this is why projects are so great, is if you can make them curious about a project, you can spend the entire rest of your technical interview talking about something that you definitely know. If they're going to ask you a question at random, hopefully you know it. If it's a project that you did, you definitely know it. And so you can really explain those in a way that gives confidence in your engineering abilities because it's something you already did. And so I am a huge fan of projects. I think every engineer should like be forced to have more, almost not like a thesis defense of like some sort of capstone project, but like they should for sure have something that they're proud of and would put their name by the time they graduate, and like college and engineering of some sort of project. So.
That's a great pro tip. And as an employer myself, I can speak to the validity of that. When, someone brings in a resume, everyone has a resume. Resumes are boring. They're hard to read. I don't feel like they provide a lot of value. But when an applicant comes in and shows me pictures or video of a project that they did, that to me is the most compelling content that you can share as an applicant for an engineering job, because now the prospective employer gets to see what you actually did. This is what you can actually bring to the table, as opposed to just words on a page, which really don't say a whole lot, in my opinion. So the newsletter now, would you say it's more geared towards students or young engineers, or even engineers later than in their career, or all of the above?
I think I try to keep it relatively general. I think there is definitely a more like junior, senior, first year, second year, so like in the 20 to 25 range, like emphasis. But personally, like as I get older, I still think it's nice to see a technical interview question and answer in my inbox on a biweekly basis, because it just keeps the skills sharp a little bit. It's like it can't really hurt if one day I'm obviously going to have to interview for something again. So it's not that crazy to me that I think it does provide value to most mechanical engineers. Obviously, I think the higher level roles, they probably start asking you a different set of questions, but then they're going to be in the position where they're interviewing people. So, maybe it's not the worst thing to have an interview question and answer that you can review and take a look at and see what you like and what you don't like about it.
Yeah. Is there other content in the newsletter beyond just the interview questions?
Yeah, so we started out with just the interview questions, and then we dabbled also with like some hardware news every once in a while. Now I kind of just include the hardware news once it's if it's extremely important. If I feel like if you're a mechanical engineer, you need to know this now. But then the other part of it is we include job links. So we'll scrape the internet for some pertinent job links for people, and we'll include like basically 16 job links of varying difficulty and pay scales and locations. And so that's just because I think a lot of people are having a hard time finding jobs, and especially if you've been looking for a while and you're kind of low on motivation. I think this is a good one where it's like you get literally links sent into your inbox every other week, and you can just look through, say, oh, this looks kind of interesting, I'll just apply now. And so it's like a good reminder to kind of stay on top of it. And even if you already have a job, it's a good reminder that you should, if you want to maintain a competitive compensation, you should continue to explore what other options look like, so you know where you are relative to the market.
Yeah. Okay, so the newsletter grew pretty quickly. Hundreds in the first, I guess it was a website back then, but hundreds in the first few weeks. And then at this point, you're up around 13,000 subscribers, which is amazing. Congratulations to you and your partner. How do you think it grew so quickly? Like what was the strategy there, if there even was one, or was it just 100% organic?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I think we have a very strong like word of mouth. So basically people find high utility in the content, I think, and they think that it's something that their friends would want. And so they send it there. And so sometimes we can see sources that'll just say like, oh, Facebook or on Reddit or even like Slack or something. And then, you know that somebody's sending it internally in some sort of group. And so that's how we get a lot of our growth actually is just, somebody finds it interesting and then they see their friend and they say, hey, you might also find this interesting. And they tell them there, which is amazing. I love community effects. I think they're so cool and fascinating and like really makes me feel happy about the world that like communities are still thriving. So
yeah, definitely. What do you see on the horizon for Hardware is Hard? Do you have any upcoming changes, or what do you want to see it 5 years from now?
That's a good question. I think I gotta ask myself that more often. But I think at this point we've built out a lot of the like core content that I really wanted to. Like the Gen 1 technical interview guide was kind of the bare bones. Like you need to know this if you're going into an interview or it's really just not going to go well. And then I think last year I upgraded it into kind of the Gen 2 of like, here are a lot of other things that are likely to be asked, but not necessarily. And then if I have time, I'll turn it into the Gen 3 of like going into different types of like heat treatments and like different metal characteristics. And I don't know, maybe even start expanding it past the cantilever beam only into some of the manufacturing stuff. But really what we would like to know is like whatever content would be most useful to you guys. So right now I'm working on a compensation piece. Basically, we had a couple hundred viewers of the newsletter fill out a form basically listing all their compensation data. And so I want to aggregate that into a really like comprehensive piece on like what is the compensation market for mechanical engineers right now, and go across ages and skill levels and universities and locations ideally. And so like that's a piece that I've always dreamed of having because I think it's something that people really invest a lot of time into looking up and don't necessarily find all the good stuff. Like I think software gets so much resourcing relative to hardware. They have levels, which is amazing resource for them. They have Hacker Rank and Leak Code for interview questions. And so that was actually like the original vision is like, why do they have that and we have nothing? We have Glassdoor scraping. And so, trying to add more interview questions always is always the goal and just help people get jobs more efficiently. But in terms of broader vision, I'm not sure. I think I gotta think more on that for 5 years.
Soul searching. Huh?
Exactly. Yeah. Gotta go back to Portugal, I guess.
Hopefully not get COVID this time.
Yeah, hopefully.
Where do you find the content? Like, is there a general source that you go to, or is it questions from readers, or is it just all over the place?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So at first, pretty much all of the content was just coming from myself. It was just like Wilder and I had, a huge bank of interview questions, and we'd go into it and say like, oh, that was a really good question. I remember when they asked me that, and I completely flubbed it. And so then I try and figure out the answer. And sometimes that's just Googling, and a lot of times these questions exist somewhere on the internet or there's something similar enough to it. Sometimes it means texting mechanical engineering friends and saying, hey, what do you think of this? And trying to work out the answer that way. But as time's gone on, we actually get a lot more submissions from people just over LinkedIn. They'll message me and say, hey, like I love Hardware is Hard. Like, thanks so much for creating it. And then I'll message them and say, hey, if you really love it, send me some interview questions. I love interview questions. And a lot of times we'll get some great submissions that way. We've even had a few guest writers of newsletters come on just through LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, DMs at least. If you text me, I'm relatively likely to respond. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of where a lot of the new sourcing has come since then, because obviously I haven't done an internship in a few years now. But it's a good way to maintain a pulse, I guess, on the community is just through messaging them.
Okay, so you have most of the content is free. I'm a subscriber right now to the Hardware is Hard newsletter. It's great, awesome content, interesting, insightful, useful. You also have some paid content. So talk a little bit about what do you get for free versus what do you get for the paid content?
Sure, yeah. So for the premium paid content, it's a book that I put together. Basically, we put together a bunch of nice graphics, really rescrubbed basically I think year one of the newsletter, then like kind of got taken off of Substack and then scrubbed through really intensely over a few months and put together new graphics. Instead of just typing in like a caret for the exponent, we went and did the whole thing in like overleaf, so that way you had nice latex, and then really compiled it into like a comprehensive workbook that I think that if you can work through that, you can basically do any technical interview for at least entry to mid-level jobs. Other than that, we also have a cheat sheet. So like something that I always do before an interview is basically I go through my resume and I think, what are my like best projects that I like to talk about? And then, oh, okay, this one has to do with natural frequency. So I'm going to write down like the natural frequency formulas, just make sure I have everything right at the top of my head. I'm going to write down like always PL cubed over 3EI, the force deflection of a cantilever beam should always be top of your mind going into a technical interview. And then basically I write down all these like basic formulas that I probably already know, but like always you get stressed in an interview. So you want to bring it to like the top of your head. And then you can just kind of use that so that like you don't have to try and dredge up something from university 3 years ago. So you can just kind of know it in your head at that point.
It's almost like being in school, a resource for studying for a test, basically, right?
Yeah, and in some ways it is. And then the other ones that we sell also are the interview question database. I can't answer all of the questions that I have, unfortunately. It just would take too long. But I do have I just had a database of like 300 questions. And I was like, well, if people want this, then they can get a sneak peek at future newsletters, I guess, or they can just try to answer it themselves, or nowadays probably ChatGPT can help them. So yeah, those are kind of the main ones that we do. And then also I think a whole nother SKU actually that I haven't really mentioned is, even if you can find a job, how do you decide where to find a job? And so Wilder's tackled this part more than me, but he was really good about using PitchBook in college, which was free, provided to Berkeley students. And so he would just troll through the startups in hardware page and figure out who was getting a ton of funding, what were the valuations. And so that was kind of how he tailored his internship search. And so he's been at Anduril for a couple of years now, and that's done very well over that time period. Yeah, so we had a whole page on how to use PitchBook and how to go through it. But then we've also compiled just a list of hardware startups that we think are likely to be successful. And if somebody wants to use that as like an application list, they can pay for that as well.
That's great. Obviously this all takes time, right? All this content doesn't just magically appear. You and Wilder are putting in hours behind the scenes to generate this really valuable content. And you're working at Apple right now, which I've heard is an intense place to work. How do you manage to balance your time? How do you manage your time between and I bet just based on the short time we've gotten to know each other here, you probably have a dozen other things in the background that you're also doing in addition to these. So what are your time management best practices like?
Oh, time management best practices. I would say it's not easy, but part of it is just diligence. I would say like really trying to create a schedule. So like use that calendar app and, break it into very fine-grained level of details. I think I actually stole this one from my mom. She showed me a schedule of when she was in college, and it was broken down to 5-minute intervals of what she was doing. And
it's like the president of the United States.
Yeah, I know. I'm not that diligent about it, unfortunately. Maybe I should be, but I'm somewhere in the half-hour increments. And, really just trying to set aside time and being productive with your time. So I think Like one thing I figured out in college was like the first couple years were a little bit more rough for me because I wasn't being active necessarily. When I would set aside time, I'd say, okay, I'm going to go study for 3 hours. And then an hour of that is just on my phone. Whereas like once I got back from my gap year, I think I was much more intentional with how I used my time, such that I would say, okay, I'm going to, finish these 2 practice tests now, and then I'm going to, be able to go play a basketball game, and then I'm going to come back and do another 2 practice tests. But it's like time isn't always enough. It's more about like engagement. And so like I try to be able to accurately gauge like, how tired am I? How much work have I done today? Am I feeling okay with this amount of productivity? And if not, that's okay. And then I should just go relax and do something that will recharge me so that I can be as productive as I can be later.
Hmm. To what extent do you feel like you have based your identity on productivity?
Oh man, getting into the moral philosophy, I guess. Um, yeah, I guess if you ask my friends, probably pretty highly intertwined. Um, I guess I also would say that there's kind of a difference to me between like just productivity and kind of a full life. Like I don't think it's realistic to just wake up and work every day until 3 a.m. and then wake up at 8 and do it again. I think that there are like kind of different batteries within you. And so like I try to charge up some batteries with other activities. And so I would say even if I'm only spending 70% of my time being productive, like I'm using the other 30% of my time to see friends or see family or go out to dinner, stuff like that. That is, I think, equally as valuable, if not more so sometimes. And so it's not all work. Don't worry.
Yeah. Awesome. I asked that question because this is something that I have been reflecting on lately, and I've realized that I have based a lot of my identity on being productive, and I didn't realize it consciously until, I don't know, a few months ago, maybe. I've been journaling more and trying to spend time reflecting on what I write down. And this is one of the insights I had, that I've based a lot of my identity on being productive. And when I'm not productive, I don't feel good about myself. And I don't think that's a healthy mindset to have, right? Because I should feel good about myself even during the times when I'm not productive. Like you said, you need to recharge the batteries, right? So like not doing stuff that you would consider productive is okay and probably necessary. So anyway, that's something that's been on my mind lately, and I've been asking other people about that.
I understand exactly what you're saying with that. I think I feel the exact same way a lot of the time. And you're right. I've also come to the conclusion that maybe that's not like a good way to live a happy life, perhaps. One thing that helped, actually, I took my last semester in college. I was already taking a bunch of texts. I was like, okay, let me tack on a course that I'm actually interested in before I leave university. In a non-technical sense, I guess, interested in. And so I took this class called Neuropsychology of Happiness, taught by Davina Chan at Berkeley. And that was a really interesting class for me, not just because like it covered a lot of the basics of psychology as well, but she had this exercise where she had a list of like 50 different things that you could do to try and be happier. And every week you were required to do 2 of them and kind of write a little bit about it and see how its impact on your happiness was. And I felt like that was extremely helpful for me. And just like thinking about your own happiness can have impacts down the line. So, yeah.
That's fascinating. That sounds like a super interesting course to take. Do you remember what were a couple of the most impactful factors that ended up being relevant for you?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that is, I think, especially pertinent to like overproductive engineers and such, is that stress stress can have very poor health consequences, I think is a well-known fact. But it also depends on how you look at it. And so there are some studies with like, I think a large number of CEOs basically, and they would go through a lot of extremely stressful events. But then based on how they reported how stressed they were, basically on how they look at the stress, it changed how the health actually impacted them. And so like a lot of stress can be changed, I guess, the health impacts based on how you're looking at it. Is it an opportunity for you to grow, or is it something that's trying to beat you down? And then so a lot of the times now, like especially if I'm at work and I'm doing something and something happens that like a crisis comes up, if I can, at first I'll be upset and then I'll remind myself and say, hey, look, like this is a really cool opportunity. Like, you spent your whole life trying to get here. Like this is exactly where you want to be, is trying to work through these hard problems. So like this is an opportunity for you to do something new.
It's all in the mind, isn't it? I've had opportunities, throughout my life, and lately as I've been journaling, this is something that's come up over and over, where I feel like my energy levels, my motivation, as much as I would love for it to be pretty constant, it's just not. There are days when I feel super good and really motivated and just plow through work. And there are other days when I don't feel great. I don't feel super motivated. I feel lethargic, and I haven't been able to pinpoint why that is. But I have these thought experiments where I think to myself, nothing has really changed, right? Like if yesterday was a great day and today is maybe just a meh day, nothing really has changed. Like my family's all good. The business is doing well. I'm healthy. No one has a gun to my head. I don't have COVID, right? Food in my refrigerator, clothing on my back, shelter overhead. Everything's still fine. So why do I feel different day to day? And it's all in the mind, right? The mind can, I'm not going to get too metaphysical here, but the mind can unlock a lot of things. And I just heard on a podcast recently, I can't remember which one, but there was this really famous case study. You may have heard of it before. Back in the 50s maybe, or 60s, there's a construction worker who, was at work doing his thing, and his foot got impaled with a steel spike, went right through his boot, right through his foot. And so they rushed him to the hospital. This spike was so like embedded through the boot that they couldn't even pull it out and then take the boot off. They had to cut the boot off from around his foot. And once the boot was completely removed, to everyone's shock, they saw that this stake hadn't even gone through the guy's foot. It went right through in between the big toe and the next toe. So it didn't impale him, but he thought it did. And the whole time, he was screaming in pain, right? Agony and pain, because he thought that this stake had gone through his foot. And it just goes to show how much control the mind has over our bodies and our thoughts and our emotions and our perception of pain and pleasure, all these different things. So
Totally though. Yeah. The mind, very powerful.
all right, well, let's wrap this up here. Maybe just one or two more questions and we'll end. For especially the younger engineers who are listening to this now, what do you think some of the emerging trends and technologies are that these younger engineers should start learning about so that they have as many opportunities as possible as they enter the job force?
I guess the way I see it, there are kind of like three big areas of opportunity right now within hardware that I think will continue to grow and be there for the next 10-ish years. So one of them, obviously, we've been seeing a lot of people or a lot of investment in kind of the AR VR space. A lot of big companies have kind of been making the bet that that's going to be the next wearable that's going to be useful. I've seen a few pretty compelling demos of AR glasses, not at Apple, just on the internet, but
Clarify there.
yeah, I wish, but yeah, no. So I've seen a few pretty compelling use cases, and the investment here is very substantial, especially because there are some players like Meta who are currently dependent on other people's hardware, and they are not happy about that. They want to own the hardware so that they can't be, controlled so much especially on the privacy front, which has been like a whole big thing. But yeah, so I see AR technology primarily in terms of energy density of batteries. I think it needs to increase. We've seen some actually pretty big changes in the last couple of years, but I think we still basically need like a step change before we're going to see really compelling AR glasses there. And then displays are kind of the other vertical that I've seen needed to be improved significantly. Like right now, waveguides have just a significant amount of loss. So I think optics would be a good place to focus within mechanical engineering to kind of try and learn some more about that, optics and like micro manufacturing techniques. But then number two, right now we're seeing like a huge increase in global tensions, unsurprisingly. And so basically there's a lot of opportunity for manufacturing within the US. And so that's been like a big movement of like the political sector right now, but then also like even within VC, like American dynamism, as it's called, is like moving manufacturing back to the US in kind of a more automated way. Because to be honest, like we're never going to be able to automate, or we're never going to be able to manufacture in the same way that they do overseas right now. It just doesn't work within the US, to be honest, within our population. And so yeah, kind of there's big opportunity there right now if you're looking to get into manufacturing. I think that's a good way to go. And then number three is probably the most interesting one to me on a personal basis is kind of like robotics and what does the future of that look like? Because obviously we're kind of on the cusp of AI agents, as they're called, to like go and, send an email for me, or like go onto this website and book a train for me. But the next logical step is go pick up groceries for me. It's go take my list off the fridge, go to Trader Joe's and pick up 15 oranges and 3 apples. And so to get there, I think it's a much more difficult road than people initially thought. Like we're just kind of seeing this with autonomous driving coming 10 years after a lot of people thought it would. Yeah, so there's a lot that needs to be done in sensor development, particularly. I think our hands are so amazing as far as actuation and tactile response and feeling. And so basically we need to be able to develop actuators and sensors that are capable of doing what our hands can do before the humanoid like robotics revolution can continue. If that's something that is a good thing is maybe debatable, but yeah, I think there's a big opportunity there in sensors specifically. I think like that plus IoT and more interconnectivity within the home is only going to grow. So
yeah. Terrific. Those are great items. Jake, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was awesome. Super fun to talk to you, get to know more about you, your co-founder, Wilder, and Hardware is Hard, and some of your experiences and insights. We'll wrap things up now. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to share before we sign off, including how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, yeah. So if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out directly to the hardwareishard@gmail.com, or you can honestly just message me on LinkedIn, and I will probably respond.
Awesome. All right, Jake. Thank you again so much.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.